Oh man, I can't remember the last time I was so excited to get into a new video, a new recording. I've literally been working for hours putting together this Phase 2 lab on the configuration of essentially all the Layer 2 setup of this network. Now remember, this whole series is called CCNA Labs, CCNA for the real world. So there's plenty of stuff in here on the CCNA. There's plenty of stuff in here that is beyond the CCNA. It's for the real world. And so as I'm writing this lab and putting it together, oh, Adobe Reader, keep trying to give me updates. Stop it. As I've been putting this thing together, I just keep getting more excited. I'm like, oh, I should add this. Oh, I should add this. And plus, looking at your feedback, a lot of feedback that's coming in, people are like, oh, what about this? What about this? So this is it. This is the first lab that I've put together. And I'll say real lab. Of course, we had Phase 1, which was planning, and that was a huge piece of it. And I can tell you my theme is I'm just thrilled to do this. It's just, this series has been on my mind for so long. So anyway, what we're going to do, this is going to be a nothing but hands-on experience as we go through and build the Layer 2 configuration of Nugget Labs. Now, the way I plan on working through this is just going until we reach a good breaking point. Usually I don't put part 1 on my nuggets because I think, oh, well, maybe I can squeeze it all in part 1. But I know that as we're talking through this, it's going to take longer than just one single nugget because there's going to be a lot of configuration. I've even thought about alternate configuration. So let me stop talking about the premise of it all and get into GNS3, get into the lab scenario. So first and foremost, I want to show you the network diagram. What I've done is I've built this network in GNS3, which the way, how do I even convey this? The way I build my series at CBT Nuggets is I never record the beginning of the series until the very end because I want to go through it all so when I record like the first nugget or two of the series, I can really say, okay, this is what you're going to experience, this is the best way to approach this series and all of that. So I don't know if I've talked about GNS3 yet. So I'm going to add a little GNS3 topic to this. I'm sure I'm going to add some overview of GNS3, but I really want to talk about how it's going to be handled in this lab because many of you may know if you've played with GNS3, GNS3 doesn't do switches. So you might say, well, how are you doing that? How do you have switches in GNS3 that you're going to configure? I'll show you that. So I'm just going to bring over the lab and we'll start working through the lab and then I'll fill in all the gaps as we go. Does that sound good? All right, so here we go. Let me shrink this down just a little bit. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so you can see Phase 2, here's our infrastructure. We've seen that diagram. Okay, the scenario. All the equipment you've suggested has been purchased, delivered, and installed at the Nugget Labs branch facility. So we're now assuming, just based on the physical configuration nuggets that I did previously, talking about how things are racked and stacked and cabled and all that, that's all been done. So that's in place. Now you have to begin with the configuration of the switch infrastructure based on the following requirements. And I did put a little note, VLAN database mode must be used to configure any VLANs on the switches. Now some of you, and I would probably say the majority of you, may not have heard of VLAN database mode. This was before we had VLAN configurations done in global config. What you would do, and I put a little hint here, you would actually go on to switch 1, or whatever switch you're on, in privilege mode. Now this is a weird departure from Cisco's norm. I'm in privilege mode, not global config, and I just type in VLAN database. And that takes me into a specialized VLAN database configuration mode, and that's where I set up all my VLANs from. VLAN 10, name, clients. VLAN 20, name, voice. All I configure all my VLANs from there, and when I exit, then it applies the configuration. That's actually the older way of doing it. You might say, well, why do we have that requirement? The reason why, and let me now get into GNS3. GNS3 is the emulation software, and I know at this point, I know I haven't mentioned it at this point, but I know I will mention it in the initial nugget, so you've probably gotten the overview, but it's the emulation software that we're using to handle this. Now, GNS3, the way that you emulate switches is by adding a router. You can see what I've chosen to use is the 3700 series router, adding a router, and then on that router, and here's my configuration. I'm actually logged into that router now, but on that router I meant to go to my configure. We add in a ether switch module. You can see network module, 16-port ether switch module, which this module allows a router to be a switch. Let me show you a picture of this. I'm going to bring in just some Google images, and you can see this is actually very similar. That's a 24-port one, but very similar to what we're using in here. It's a little module that slides inside of the router and allows you to have a switch inside of your router. Now, I will tell you, in my experience, those things are so expensive, you might as well buy multiple switches in the first place. But they are pretty cool. And you can see there's a good picture of one right there. Oh yeah, that right here is actually the module that we're using right here is the 16-port ether switch. That's a nice beefy one down below. But this allows you to have kind of a swouter, an all-in-one switch router device that you can install. So that's what we're using. So we're actually running the switch inside of a router. Now, how did I get a switch icon? Well, I just right-click, change the symbol. It came over as a router, and I said, well, that's not the symbol. I'm going to switch it over and use the switch symbol instead. This is our switch 1, our multi-layer switch. Going to be doing, all of our routing function. Switch 2 and switch 3 are going to just be our access layer switches. That's where I have some PCs plugged into play. So all that being said, when you use an ether switch module, you need to use VLAN database configuration mode, just because they, at least in the iOS that I'm using, they did not implement VLANs from global configuration mode. And I'm using, I believe, 12.4 something on these routers. So that's kind of a note, and you'll see some differences in the commands. Now, before I go through, now do remember this is a walkthrough of the lab. I'm actually going to go through and configure this scenario one by one. If you would like, and I would say if you feel the confidence, if you have ninja skills, have at it before you go through this. I am going to make these GNS3 files, the lab, everything available to you to download and try. So give it a whirl, do your best, see how far you can get in this lab, and then come back here and fill in the gaps. It's always the best to learn is just banging your head against it for a few hours or minutes, depending on your patience tolerance. But I am going to walk through it. So if this is your first time through the series, maybe you watch it, you kind of get the idea of what's going on, and then you give it a try yourself and see if you can do everything that you saw, jogging your own memory. You're not going to remember everything that I do in here on your own until you do it a few times. So, okay, can you tell I'm just ready to get going? Okay, so here it is. This first bullet, we may end up spending the entire nugget just on this. This is what I would call the base configuration of the switches. Now, I will tell you that when I do base configurations, or whenever I see base configurations, I immediately go, okay, Notepad or something should be used to help make this more efficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this as we go, typing in the commands in Notepad and then pasting them into the router. Now I'm going to start off, as you saw, I double-clicked on, where am I, switch 1. I'm going to start off at the core, and every single one of the switches, each switch will need a base configuration, including the host name, passwords, logon banner, 3-hour console port timeout, synchronous logging, Telnet and SSH should be enabled, HTTP management disabled, turn on DNS and use those servers for name resolution, clock should be set, we should be using NTP to synchronize our clocks between all our devices. But by the way, when I say clock set, NTP configured, what I mean is we're going to manually set it because we won't actually have internet access at this point in the lab. So NTP, while we'll be able to configure it, it won't actually work until we bring up the internet link, which is router 1 over here, which that's going to be another lab. And then finally, the management VLAN and IP address should be used configured using the following table. Now, you remember from our let me bring up my, let's see if I've got my port spreadsheet. On our port spreadsheet, we went through and defined, let's see, the management VLAN is VLAN 71. And then we said, okay, here's the different devices. And what that allowed for, just to review a little bit, is it allowed for all of the management functions of these devices. And right now we're just talking about Telnet and SSH, but eventually SNMP, syslog monitoring, there's all kinds of stuff that we now just put on a completely separate VLAN from everybody else. Advantage? Nobody else gets to your management network that you don't allow. Now, we're not going to put on access restrictions yet, but this will at least be the beginning of setting this up to be a secure managed system. All right, good. So like I said, I probably will spend this entire nugget just doing the base configuration on each device. So let's get going. I'm going to start off with switch number 1. So I'm going to bring two things into play here. Number 1, I'm going to bring in my configuration console, make that guy a little bit bigger. Number 2, I'm going to bring it up, Notepad++. This is, by the way, if you haven't used Notepad++, so much better than Windows Notepad. Of course, what's not better than Windows Notepad? Free download, just great for editing anything. It's primarily designed for coders, developers, things like that. But man, it's just a lot easier to use for Cisco kind of stuff. So first things first, we are looking to get in and configure the host name. So I'm going to go in to my switch. Let's do a little no here. There may not be enough space available. I might have to increase my flash here. All right. Enter. Okay, so now notice they're all coming up as routers, but again, in our picture, they're not really routers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in enable. Now, I'm going to, as I do this, replicate it over here on Notepad. Now, normally, I will say in the real world, I would just sit here with Notepad++ and just hammer out a base configuration and then paste it straight into the router. But I know, we're at the CCNA level. A lot of you may not know the commands off the top of your head, so I want to show you typing it in and then replicate it over into Notepad++. One of the things I like having is Secure CRT or PuTTY, and it allows you to go in and type commands. I've got configure terminal, and as you just highlight them, I always set it to copy straight to the clipboard, and then I can just come over here and paste it in. So I've got enable, configure terminal. Let me just put those close together, and then the first thing I'm going to do is configure that host name parameter. Now that's an easy one, or should be an easy one. Where'd my lab go? There it is. So I'm going to have the host name, and then I'm going to have the passwords. So the first thing I'm going to do in Secure CRT is just type in host name. Now this is Nugget Labs branch 1 switch 1. And in my Notepad++ file, I'm going to make that its own little separate line. To change this, everything else I'm going to kind of group together, smoosh together, kind of like I have enable and configure terminal. But the ones that I kind of put gaps in, I'll immediately see them and I go, okay, that needs to change as I paste it into the other devices. So now I've got the host name configured, immediately reflected there. Now I want to get in and hop into the passwords. So we've got the console port, VTY port, and enable password should all be set to Cisco. Now, I know some of you coming from CCNA are thinking, okay, enable password, enable secret, and I'll tell you, real world, forget that you ever knew about enable password. There's a command. I can type in enable password, which is a clear text password stored in the running config, or enable secret are the ones that I can type in, which is an MD5 hash in the running config. Real world, I mean, enable secret has been around since the turn of the century, even the 90s. So nobody, unless you just have an archaic device, will ever even think about using enable password. So since we're talking about it, let's do it. Let's do enable secret Cisco. All the passwords were supposed to be set to Cisco. Copy that, blast it into my configuration. Oh, and I just naturally typed in Control C there. So enable secret Cisco. Now let's do line VTY04. That's going to be all of our telnet ports. Password Cisco. Line console 0. Password Cisco. Now let me copy and paste all those to Notepad. This little pause thing works quite well. So, just like that, they're all pasted into Notepad. I like putting little spaces here. It doesn't hurt anything, just so I know this is sub-configuration mode. It's just visually, I'm a visually appealing guy. If it doesn't look good, I just don't like using it. And I don't like one blob of a configuration all in there. So I use little spaces to distinguish what, when I'm going into a sub mode like line console 0 and all the commands underneath there. Okay, good. So we've got the passwords all set to 0. Now logon banner. Now they didn't tell us what we should use as our logon banner. It's okay. I would say if you're on a CCNA exam, they will probably say make the logon banner say do not log on or something like that. So we're given free reign of this. Let's do it. We'll get into the switch and I'll type in banner MOTD. And you can see, well, first off, there's a few banners. You can see there's incoming banners. A lot of people use the login banner, which is great, but doesn't show it for everything. There's certain areas where the login banner won't be seen. Whereas banner MOTD is a message of the day. It's pretty much seen at every single point on the device. A couple ways people do logon banners. You can see that the syntax here is C banner text C, where C is the delimiting character. Some people go, okay, so that means all in one line I'll put star don't log on star, and that will be my logon banner, and that works. So now when I exit out on my device, well, that was kind of non-exciting. So exit out here, I'll hit enter, and now I can see my little simple logon banner, don't log on. It's displayed now for every single logon. So now I also can verify right there. I've got my enable secret password that is set. The way I like doing the logon banner is I do banner MOTD and then type in a delimiting character, and I won't use star because I like using stars in my logon banner. Maybe I'll use a $sign, right? And hit the enter key, because now I go into this little free-form text editor mode, and now I can, get fancy. Do not log in. Now, I'm sure many of you know a lot of tips about logon banners. Don't get crazy. I mean, don't get in there and have a huge page-long logon banner, because it fills up the NVRAM of your device. Also, don't get silly. As goofy as I am, that's one area I don't want to be goofy. I don't want to, start using you can't touch this, you can't log in, anything that at all tells somebody like, yeah, I'm better than you. I can secure this. You get what I'm saying. You tempt people anytime you put a logon banner like that, because immediately, if you're a hacker, you go, want to bet, and you want to start going at it. So just something simple. The Department of Defense of the United States has a great logon banner they make publicly available. Actually, I might even include that in the files. Actually, I don't need to do that. I just went to Google, and if you just type in DoD logon banner, I think the second hit on there shows a lot of the different options. It shows first off from the security experts, this is does your banner state this? Does it mention this? The kind of questions to ask about your banner, and then they give you some sample great ones. For instance, here's a nice little, this computer system is the property blah 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 blah. And so that's a great computer logon banner. Here's a different one. So you can just copy paste and kind of hack those up based on your name. For now, since our system didn't ask for a specific one, we'll just say do not log in, and a little $sign at the end says we're done. So now when I exit out, I can hit enter and see that my logon banner is reflected. Good. So let me get that pasted to the notepad file. Awesome. So now we are good on that. Let me hit enter a couple times, and we are now back here. So we've got logon banner, passwords, hostname, console port. We need a 3-hour timeout and synchronous logging. Now, by default, console port defaults to 5 minutes timeout, which is maybe good if you're in a production environment, but man, in a lab, that's painful. So let's go in line console 0, and I will say plenty of people go in and in a lab environment just type in no exec timeout, which completely disables the idle timeout, and that's good. That's good for a lab environment. Never good for production, because somebody can just come in and wham, they're in whatever mode you last left off at. So we'll use to meet the lab requirements, we'll use exec timeout, and you can see we've got timeout in minutes. So 3 hours is what, 180 minutes. And then if this is if you're really granular, timeout in seconds, or maybe you just want to be mean to somebody and you set their idle timeout for like 1 second. So if they stop typing for a second, bam, they're logged off. So idle timeout 180 does it for us. And we wanted logging synchronous because I'd already experienced it. Whenever you type, Control Z or something, and I do a show run, this is just painful. Where it cuts what you're typing in half, and you've now got show running. It's just like it's infuriating. So if you are actively working on the console, then that can really be annoying. So we'll go into line con 0, and it's just that one command, logging synchronous. Enter. And now those have been added to our config. I've now spliced them into our template configuration right here. Exec timeout 180, logging synchronous, just kind of squeeze them in the console port at that point. So we're good. Okay, now we're down to Telnet and SSH enabled. Well, we already enabled Telnet when we assigned a password to the VTY ports and an enable secret password. Not too sure if you're aware of this, but first off, if you don't assign a password to the VTY ports, well, check this out. I'll go to my switch and I'll do a show run. I'll do section line. I'll just do line. And if you haven't seen the section command, oh, it's so nice. So anything, it shows any section that begins with the word line. And right there, you can see the default config of VTY is, well, we added this, password Cisco, but look at this, login. Notice the word login is not under line console 0. What does login mean? It means require logins to this port. So if I don't have a password and I try to telnet to this device before I've set a password on here, the login command will boot them out because it's going to say, hey, we're requiring logins, but there's no password set. Click, and it disconnects the telnet session. So just by assigning a password to the VTY port, we've now enabled logins to that port. Now, I also mentioned by assigning an enable secret because Cisco added another layer of security in that if you don't have an enable secret on a device, like for instance, let's say switch 1 does not have it, that means you can telnet and get into user mode, but when you type in the command, it's just going to say, sorry, there's no enable secret set or no enable password has been set on this device. Cisco recognizes that you've telnetted in remotely and there's no password, so it's not going to let you in. If you're on the console port, it'll let you in without a password. You've seen that already plenty of times. But on the telnet session, no go. So those two things, just by doing that, enabled telnet. SSH, on the other hand, is a little bit more to it. Now at the CCNA level, Cisco just kind of wants you to know the commands. They don't really get into a lot of the cryptography behind it or what kind of keys you're generating. They just like, here, this is how you enable Telnet. First off, Telnet requires you to generate encryption keys. And we can't, and let me show you the command to do that. I go into global config mode and do crypto key generate RSA. It's an RSA key, and you can just hit enter, but it's gonna give me an error. It's gonna say, hey, you need a domain name first, because it actually names the key set, the encryption keys, after your domain name. So it'll be NLB1 switch 1. It'll be the host name dot whatever domain name you specify, and in here it says use nuggetlabs.com as your domain name. Okay, so I'll go back here. IP domain name. Just paste that guy in there, nuggetlabs.com. Now I'll be able to hit the up arrow and do crypto keys generate RSA. Now it says, okay, we'll generate some keys. Here's the key name. You see that domain name in there? The name for these keys will be this. And says, what size of modulus do you want? Now the lab didn't really tell us a size. It just said use Nugget Labs, use admin Cisco as your credentials, but this is left for our game, so you can leave it at the default. You could choose anything. When I'm in the real world, I usually choose 1024, just because those are nice beefy keys that aren't crackable. But even 512-bit, this is how many bits. Just to give you an idea, most of our normal keys we use day to day are like 128 bits. So 512 is huge, but we're talking about, again, without getting into all the keys and what kind of keys there are and all that. I'll just say 1024 is a really good, strong strength. And so now, look at that. Poof. SSH is enabled. But there's still more to it. Because when I enable SSH, well, first of all, I see SSH version 1.99 has been enabled. Well, that's great, and it works fine, and it would meet the requirements of the lab because SSH is enabled. But nowadays, everybody uses SSH version 2. Which is 2.0. That they came out with a stronger security system in version 2. So I'll do that there. Again, if you did the lab without me and you didn't do this, that's totally fine. That wasn't part of the labs. But one of the things that does happen when you do enable SSH, and you have to do this, is enable username and password authentication. So SSH doesn't just use a password. it uses a username and a password, unlike Telnet, where you just get in with the password. So it says use admin Cisco for your SSH credentials. Well, I'm going to go in here and create that user account. I'm going to do username, admin, and again, either way would be fine, but you have the ability, there's a lot of options, but I could type in password Cisco, or I could type in secret Cisco. What do you think is better? Simply because it stores the password using MD5 hash in the running config, so it's not easy to crack should somebody get a copy of your running configuration. Finally, the last thing that I want to do is go under line VTY04. Yeah, I'm back there again. And type in login, but now I'm going to add in local. Huh? So what's the difference, Jeremy? What's the difference between login and login local? Well, looking over here, I've got VTY password Cisco. Login says use the password under the VTY ports. When I go in and type in login local, that says use the local user database for your passwords under the VTY ports, rather than just this password. So I will say, when I type in login local and press the enter key, I eliminate the need for this. That password will never be used because it says use the local user database. Use the account that you enabled in global configuration mode, which we better copy to our running configuration. And I'll just splice it in right here. Again, most of the commands, order doesn't really matter. I just like having a user account before I type in log in with the local database, which needs a user account to do that. So that now enables SSH on our device. And once we get more devices, we'll be able to test that. But let me finish copying all these pieces over. Okay, there we go. I've got all the right pieces now in the places they go. You can see, notice one of the things I did here is I put in, for instance, login local up here under the VTY ports. SSH version 2, did the domain name, got the user account created, but then when I did the crypto key generate RSA, I just typed in a little indented 1024 and then press the enter key. So because remember, my goal is to create a template configuration which allows me to just paste it in, and I want to have an answer to that question when it does ask. All right, so let's go back here. We've got SSH, HTTP management disabled. That's an easy one, and a lot of people do that because, well, you don't want web GUIs being exposed that people can reach, and once you know how to work with the command line, you don't want to use a web GUI anymore. So I'll do no IP HTTP server. That's the one command to do that. So a lot of these are pretty straightforward. DNS name resolution, and I'll get this and the other one pasted into Notepad in a second. DNS name resolution to 4.2.2.2 and 4.2.2.3. Simple as going IP domain, nope, not domain name, domain lookup, and then we type in, oh, wait a sec. Oh, no, it's IP name server. I keep thinking of disabling name lookup. IP name server, and we'll do 4.2.2.2 and 4.2.2.3. And that will allow us from our switches to do things like, ping google.com. And it won't work now, but if I could type that in, and it will try to resolve that to an IP address rather than just saying, sorry, I don't know where google.com is. Last two is going to be setting the clock with NTP, and then setting the management VLAN. So the clock is one of the weird ones that is not in global configuration mode. It's done from privilege mode. And the reason why is this is not something that's stored in a config file. Like, you'll never go into your running config and see clock set or anything like that, because it affects the actual BIOS, and I shouldn't even say BIOS, but the I don't know, what do you call it? Firmware, the something that the device uses when it boots up to set the clock. Just like, setting the clock on your PC actually sets it in the BIOS, because if you had a command that was clock set, then every time the device booted, it would set to whatever time you put in there, and you can't have that because it would be incorrect. So I'm going to use clock set, and current time is 10:29. Let's just say 10:30 by the time I finish typing this command in. In the morning on, today is December 6th, of December. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They type in, for instance, December right now. And if I were to type in 12, it would say, well, that's the day of the month, you know, because people think, oh, the number of the month. But you actually type in the name. Anytime you see something in all capitals like that, month, that's a variable. You have to type in some value, you know, Jan, December. You can even type in the whole name. It'll take it. So we'll say 6th of December, 2011. And hit enter. So now I've got that in there. Clock has been updated from looks like 2002 over to 2011. So now I can copy all this to my Notepad file. Now notice when I did that, I copied them over and I put my name server, my no web server and all that. But at the very end is where I put the clock set because I can't type that from global config, whereas all of these are global configuration commands. So before I finish, I'm going to type in end, which drops back to privilege mode, then do my clock set, and I put a little gap here to remind me to change this because when I paste it into the different devices, it will no longer be that time again. So we've got the clock. It's now set. And okay, last two pieces is NTP and the management VLAN. NTP, Network Time Protocol, will be something that keeps my clock in sync because the clocks drift all the time. My car is the perfect example. I have a Saturn car, and the clock just moves ahead like a minute a day. I don't know why. So by the time, you know, a few days have passed, my clock is just way off in the car. Same thing happens, but hopefully in a little lesser of a range there on your devices. They'll just drift because we don't have atomic clocks keeping them accurate. So we point to someone who does. So I'm going to do NTP server and type in the IP address that was given to us right here. It says use this as your NTP server. That happens to be what I did was I went to a command prompt, and I probably won't get the same IP address now because it is literally a pool of servers, but I did ping pool.ntp.org, which is a great, and you can see the IP address is different now. I'm just having to grab one from that pool and typed it in there. Now, a couple thoughts. Some of you might say, well, didn't you enable DNS? So now you can just type in pool.ntp.org as the name server. Yes, you can, but the way the iOS works is as soon as I press the Enter key on that, it will try to look up and resolve the IP address of pool.ntp.org and then save that in the running config. So by typing in the domain name here, it's immediately going to look it up and then type in whatever IP address that resolves to based on DNS. It doesn't actually store the name in here. So that will now go out, and I'll do a show NTP associations. And you can see right there, I've got this address. That's the IP address of the NTP server I typed in. I can see that it is configured. That's the little tilde there. But it has not synced yet. It should have a little star right there. If it's synced and it's now using that as the clock. And the reason it hasn't synced is it can't contact it. It doesn't have an IP address. My switch doesn't have an IP address yet to communicate with. That's the last piece that we're going to do, which is the management VLAN. So, like I said, we're having VLAN 71 as our management VLAN. Now, let me do a show IP interface brief here. You're able to see right there are the two built-in fast Ethernet ports on my router. 0 and 1. That comes on any 3700 series router. They're built into the chassis itself. But then right here you can see I go to module 1, port 0, module 1, port 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 15. This is my 16 port, start counting from 0, 16 port ether switch module that I have set up and configured on this device. Now when I put this ether switch inside of here, it behaves just like a normal switch. So it automatically creates this VLAN 1 interface, which is the default VLAN. You can't delete it, but what you can do is not use it, and that's usually Cisco's best practice. So I'm going to type in, now check this out, not VLAN 1, interface VLAN 1, and I'm going to do a shutdown, which now turns off that interface from being in operation. So now we've got that interface, and now changed it down. I'll do a show. I'll type in do show IP interface brief, and the do command allows me to type show commands from any mode. And now I can see VLAN 1 shut down. That's how I like to leave it. It's gone. So now I'll exit back out and type in IP address. Oh, wait, what am I doing? interface VLAN 71, which is going to be the new management VLAN that I'm creating. Now, I haven't yet created VLAN 71. I have to do that, but I'm going to go in and create interface VLAN 71, which is the management interface for that. So I'm going to say, okay, interface VLAN 71. Now I'm going to do the IP address. This will be the IP address that I use to manage this switch. I said switch 1, we'll use that. So I'll go in and paste that in. Save myself some typing here as well. Paste that in. And then we've got to remember, because when I do a show IP interface brief, you see, oh, well, different switches have different defaults. A lot of times the VLAN interface will be shut down, be administratively down, and I have to do a no shutdown to bring it up. It doesn't hurt to do that, but that's okay. We can type that in. I'm just in the habit, I always type it in just to bring it up. Now notice that the management VLAN, VLAN 71, shows a status of up, but a protocol of down. What's up with that? Well, this says it's active, it's configured, it's working, if you will, at layer 1, if you want to think about it that way, but it's not actually communicating simply because that VLAN doesn't exist. There is no VLAN 71. You might say, well, didn't you just create it? No, I didn't. I created the interface for VLAN 71, but I haven't actually created VLAN 71. Matter of fact, that comes right here in what we're going to do in the next nugget. Configure all the necessary VLANs. Enable VLAN 64, 65, or 66. All the different VLANs, including VLAN 71. Just to give you a sneak peek, that's where we're going to go into that VLAN database mode and type in VLAN 71. Name management, which allows, and you can see there's a lot of options I can do on that, but just typing in the VLAN, naming it management is now good to go. So I'll exit out. Yeah, this is. I had a feeling this was going to happen. I've got to add more flash to my routers. It's saying you're out of flash. So I'm going to add more flash to my routers because it's saying I can't apply this to the flash because VLANs actually apply directly to a file called VLAN.dat. So for now, I'm going to abort that simply because we're gonna do the VLAN configuration in the next nugget, and I'm going to add more flash to my routers. So just to show you, right now I've got no data available, although I see a VLAN.dat. That's interesting. So I've got, I would say that's a GNS3 figuring I'll have to do. But that's how I would go in and create the VLANs. But for now, that creates the management VLAN IP address. So let's add all of that to our template configuration. All right, there we go. So I've added the NTP, VLAN 1, shut it down. Notice I put a nice little gap here so I know to change this on the other switches. VLAN 71, here's its IP, no shutdown. Then after, and I did this without, I just did this naturally. I just typed in WR, write mem, whatever version you want to use. That's the old version of copy run start. I will say eventually it will go away. Cisco on their new Nexus software have eliminated the write mem. You now have to use copy run start. But that's okay. We'll get used to it. Write mem is just a nice shortcut. So I squeeze that in after the clock set command. So now for the other switches, this config gets really easy. All I have to do now is hop over to, let's go to switch 2. Oh, that's not GNS3. There we go. Switch 2, click on that, or double click on that. There we go, switch 2. Do I want to enter initial config dialog? No, I'll let that go through its little power on junk behind the screen. Meanwhile, I'll jump in here. Okay, say this is switch 2. This is, let's see, Nugget Labs. What other unique things? Okay, this was 2 as the management IP, and then the clock is now 42 on the 6th of December. So I've got all that. Here's all I got to do. Hopefully, if I've done everything right, go into global config mode. Now, oh, well, do I have config T and all that? Oh, I do. Man, look at me. I'm on top of it. So I'll just right click, paste it all in. Look at that. Wham. Save. Isn't that awesome? So I just went into global config mode. Actually, I didn't even need to because I had config T as part of my template. Name the router, blasted in all this configuration. And set the crypto keys, generated the crypto keys, name server, NTP server, VLAN interface, everything is just set on the fly. And then finally, of course, just as a finishing touch, save the configuration to make sure everything is good to go. Let's jump over to switch 3. Bring that guy up. Let him go through his little screen dump process. And let's change this, switch 3. And by doing it this way, you now have documentation of every command that you've typed in on the device just for your records. And you can email that to people and say, hey, look, this is what I did, all that. So copy. And now I'll just paste it in there. And one thing I will mention is if you start doing this with really big configurations, a lot of times the serial port can't keep up with the amount of data that you're shoving in, and you'll start getting scrambled text and all that. If you do, and this is different based on what terminal program you're using, if you do, you can actually add pauses to where it puts a little pause in between each character, like a half second or 100 milliseconds or something to slow down the stream from the terminal so the serial port can keep up. I usually find once I exceed about 2 pages of configuration, meaning like Microsoft Word size pages, that's where the config just starts getting wacky if you paste it in. Which is, if you have a TFTP server, that eliminates that, but it's sometimes a pain to set up a TFTP server just to do a base configuration. So I usually either will set the pause, or if I'm in a terminal program where I can't add pauses in between lines or characters, I'll just paste in a page at a time, which is still better than manually typing it, of course. So at that point, let's just take a look. We now have this initial bullet of the switch base configuration done. I knew that would take us some time, so let's wrap it up there. Base configuration done. Now we can start moving into some of the communication between our devices and get that going. For now, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.